I'm going to do is I'm going to record these. So every lesson you can go back to it and watch it if you didn't understand something. Obviously, you can ask
Okay.
me as well in the group chat. And obviously everyone's in the group chat, so you can, if there's any questions you guys need help on, you can always ask each other as well. It's always good. If you struggle anything, obviously just type the answers in the chat. But the main thing is that last year I kind of did help like these guys quite a bit in terms of teaching them the content. And I realized that, you know, I told them a lot of information, but you know, to take in everything, especially in economics, is quite a lot. There's so much content. And so you're gonna have to like work on it yourself a lot as well, because you're not gonna make like I'm gonna like guide you throughout the whole thing. But the main progress that you're gonna find is when you actually go back through it and do some of the work yourself. That's what every student, like every A-star student, A-grade student, they, you know, just because someone goes tuition doesn't mean that they're gonna come out with an A-star. They don't put the work in it themselves, they're not even gonna get like a C grade.
Yeah.
So can you see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Can you see this checklist here?
Yeah.
All right. So basically, I'll just quickly break it down again. So you're gonna have 3 papers. We're all doing a Dexel here. So paper 1, everything will be on microeconomics. Paper 2, everything will be on macroeconomics. And paper 3, you'll get a combination of both. Okay. And so in year 1, what we've done so far is all of this basically. So we've done everything in micro year 1, all of this stuff here. So this should be all like checked off. We've done all of market failure. And we've done also something called behavioral economics as well. So you might not be you might be familiar with some of these topics, but maybe not all of them, but that's fine. I'm gonna resend like I have notes on everything that when I did my exams. So you can just read over them. If there's anything you struggle on, just put it in the chat or just you can call me, DM me, whatever, and then I can explain it to you. Tadro can also share his videos from last year, I think. And then you can watch those as well. But yeah, they're pretty straightforward. You can also ask him because I'm sure he still knows most of it. Tahmid, I did all of this with you as well. So year 1, we did microeconomics year 1, market failure, and behavioral economics. Okay. So what we've got left for the rest of micro for your paper 1 this year is micro year 2 content, so 1 to 16, and then another topic called labor markets, which is a 1 to 9. Okay, so we're going to go through all these. Now, it looks like you've done most of it, right? But actually, micro year 2 and labor markets, there's a lot of content that we need to go through. In terms of macroeconomics, in year 1, we did the yellow highlighted part. So I'll send you all of these documents anyway. We did the yellow highlighted part, and that counts as your year 1 content. So if you could go over that, Ijaz, and then if there's anything you struggle on, you can just tell me again. But everything is like properly explained in the notes anyway. But yeah, don't feel afraid to ask any questions. You're paying for this, so you have to get the most out of me. And yeah, so these white parts here, these are the rest of the stuff that we need to cover. And then we've got 2 more topics this year that we need to cover. We'll probably do it next year. Is financial markets and development economics. So economics. And so most of the questions you're gonna get is actually from like this section here. But you should also know some stuff about the financial markets and development economies. They may ask you questions on that as well. It's not that common, but if they ask you, you can't be stuck in a situation like, well, I don't know anything about this. So that's why you still need to do it. But anyway, we're gonna start off with micro year 2 content today. And the first topic, we're gonna start off with something called the law of diminishing returns. Have you heard of that before?
Not
I
really.
think I've had a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Wait, when did you start school this year?
2
Like
weeks ago.
around, yeah, 2, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right. And what topic are they teaching you? They're doing micro, right?
Yeah.
Our
We've
teachers
got
do
two
both.
teachers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fine.
I'm just doing
Um,
macro.
Yeah. All right, that's fine. But we're gonna try bang out micro first, because I think that's what we're gonna have to get our head around the most. Macro, should, we don't really have much left for that. It should be fine. Micro, yeah, we definitely need to do this together. Alright, so let's start with the first topic, law of diminishing returns. Remember, if there's anything you don't understand, just tell me. So what is law of diminishing returns? So this is basically when we're looking at the short run aspects, we refer to the factors of production. Remember the factors of production, all right? Land, labor, capital, and enterprise.
So
Yeah, so in the short run, we say that at least one of these factors is fixed, whereas in the long run, all of these factors are variable. Okay, so we might say that in the short run, which factors do you think might be fixed in the short run? What makes sense? Probably land, right?
Yeah.
In the short run, we're not going to adapt land too much. What about labor? Do you think labor is fixed in the short run?
It can be.
It can be, but most of the time in the
No.
short run, in terms of employment, it's probably they're gonna probably change it around a lot.
Yeah.
Capital, so we're talking about
that looks into
man-made.
the long run.
What do you say?
That looks into the long run, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so capital can be changed a lot in the long run, but in the short run, it's probably gonna stay fixed as well because these are man-made aids to production. Okay.
Mm.
Enterprise, of course, that's like just entrepreneurship. This may also change a lot, but land and capital are most likely going to stay fixed in the short run. But that's why we have in this table, we have a stock of factors of production. So here we have land, and at each stage we have just 10 units of land. Okay, it's not changing at all. Same with capital. So this is why it's fixed. And here we have labor. Now labor, at each stage we're increasing it by 1. Okay, you see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is why it's considered as a variable. Now what we want to understand is as we increase our labor, but we keep our land and capital fixed, what happens in terms of productivity? What happens in terms of the return that this business is making? That's what we're trying to see. And so what we'll see is that as we add more labor to a stock of fixed factors of production, the total product that a business creates starts to initially increase, but then it starts to fall. And that's called the law of diminishing returns. So we'll see this here. So right now we're at 1 labor. There's 1 guy working, and this 1 guy is producing 4 units of product. Consider it as productivity. Okay. And the marginal product at this point is 4 as well. Do you know what marginal means?
So it's like every one you consume, it's like kind of increases or decreases.
Yeah, so it's like the extra amount you get from an increase in 1 labor. Okay, so we went from 0 to 1 labor. At 0 labor, we have 0 total product, right? No one's producing anything. But as soon as we go to 0 to 1, we have now 4 products that this guy is producing. So our marginal products also 4 because we went from 0 to 4. Now, if we have, instead of 1 labor, we have 2 people working, then 2 people are able to create a total product of 9 now. Okay, so what would be the marginal product from 4 to 9? 5, yeah. Because that's anytime you hear marginal, it's just the extra amount. Now we have 3 people working. Our total product is 15. What's the marginal product? It's 6, right? So can you see in terms of the marginal product that it's increasing from 4 to 5 to 5 to 6, right? And so
how does that increase though? How did it go from 5 to 6 and then 6 to 2? Like how?
Because do do you know how we got these numbers, first of all?
Nah, I don't.
So you know how we got 4, right? Because this one guy produced 4. So we went from
Yeah.
0 to 4. But now
Yeah.
with 2 people, we're able to produce 9, right? We
Okay.
went from 4 to 9, which is a difference of 5.
Oh,
And now with 3 people, we went from 9 to 15. Now the difference between that third worker added 6 basically.
okay.
Do you get it?
Yeah.
If we went from 3 to 4, they went from 15 to 17, and that fourth worker only added 2. Yeah?
Okay.
Do you get it? 100%.
Kind of, yeah.
So initially the marginal product of adding one more worker increases. Okay. So the marginal product is basically telling us what each worker is producing on top of the last worker. Okay. So it went from 45 to 6, and now it's decreasing to 2, which is where the diminishing return sets in. Because initially we had something called specialization of labor. We had specialization because these first 3 workers were getting really good at what they were doing. They were producing more and more. But now, as soon as we added this fourth worker, the principle is that this fourth worker isn't actually adding more than 6 now. It's only adding an extra 2. Okay. So workers still would be hired. It's just that they're not as productive as before. The reason is because it's said that when we add a lot of these variable workers, these variable factors to a stock of fixed factors, then it starts to get like overcrowded. You know, think about an office space. Say if you have like a room and there's people working there, and you keep adding more and more workers into that room, then at first when you add the first couple, yeah, they're working well together and stuff like that. But when you add too much, it might get overcrowded. They can't be as productive as they could before. And that's why putting too many variable factors of production to a stock of fixed factors may not be good for the long run. So this is why we see a marginal product increase and then marginal product a decrease. And it could get so bad that this 6th worker is actually making the total product decrease from 18 to 15. And so now we have a negative marginal product. Okay. And so this is the correct definition that you should just know, is that the law of diminishing returns, we say that in the short run, when we add the variable factors of production to a stock of fixed factors of production, total product or marginal product, same thing, will initially rise, then fall, as with marginal product. So I just said that. Okay. It's a bit to get your head around, but it's really to explain curvature. So we're going to see a lot of graphs that have a lot of these kind of curves. Okay. And they're all described by the law of diminishing returns. Okay. So like, say if I want to plot the marginal product or the average product curve, then I'll see that it initially is rising, but then it starts to fall, and the marginal product can even get negative at this 6th worker. So that's all we're doing. It's not very common that they ask a specific question on this. It's more likely to come up as like a multiple choice or something. You just have to know like this table pretty well, like how to work out the marginal product, what the definition of law of diminishing returns is. Maybe they might ask you to work out the average product, and to work out the average of anything, you just do the total over the amount there is. So you do the total over the quantity. So for example, the average product of the first worker is 4 divided by 1. Average product of the second worker is 9 divided by 2, then 15 divided by 3, and so on. Okay. Stop me if you don't understand, if you want to go over it again, but are we happy so far with this?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, again, I sent the notes on the WhatsApp group, so you can just pull those up and just read over it. I think I'll set you guys a couple pages to read before the lesson, so that way you'll probably have a better understanding. Let's look at the cost of production now. So what we're going to find is that a lot of these micro diagrams, they're a bit sophisticated and they are created through using a lot of curves. There's two types of curves that we're going to look at. We're going to look at cost curves, which is what we're looking at here. And then later on, we're going to look at, instead of cost, we're going to look at revenue curves. All right. So we all know what a fixed cost is. A fixed cost in economics is a cost that does not vary with output, whether you increase or decrease production. For example, of salaries, rent, insurance. Yeah. Even if you produce more of a good, it doesn't mean your salaries go up, doesn't mean your rent goes up. Fixed cost is a fixed cost. Whereas a variable cost, these are costs that do vary with output. For example, wages, right? Raw material costs, these do vary with output. So this is how a average fixed cost curve looks like. So over time, as we produce more and more output, our average, our total fixed cost is still the same when we produce more output. This is what we just said. But our average fixed cost can reduce. Why? Because to find the average fixed cost, we do the fixed cost over the output, isn't it? Of how much we produce. And so if our fixed cost is the same and our output's increasing, then our average fixed cost is going to start to lower and lower as we increase our output. So what we're doing is that we're just spreading our fixed cost along the way of how much we produce. For example, if you produce 1 unit, your fixed cost may be 100K, but if you produce 10 units, it may be 10K. So your cost is spread out. So for every unit you produced, you need to pay 10K fixed cost for that. Variable cost, these are costs that do vary with output, like we said. The shape of the curve can be explained through the law of diminishing returns. So first it initially goes down, then starts to go up. You can see this here. So say we have workers and we're paying them £100 each in terms of wages. So let's say that this first worker produces 10 units. His average variable cost is obviously going to be 100 over 10. Then we're going to do for the second worker, our total wages is £200 or salaries even. Then we have do 200 divided by 30 because that second worker has now a total of 30 units. And so we can plot these average variable costs along a curve, and we'll see that it initially goes down, then goes up. Okay. So at first there's initial marginal gains till your fourth worker, who doesn't produce as much as the previous worker, so the variable costs start to increase after it fell, which is shown on the graph. Okay. So we want our variable cost to increase because that's good for a business. As soon as you add too many workers, your variable cost may start to increase because of the law of diminishing returns. All right, so short run cost curves. So these are just some standard formulas. Total cost is equal to the fixed cost plus variable cost. I'm sure you guys know that. How do we work out, what if a question asks to work out the marginal cost? Okay. The correct formula to work out marginal cost is the percentage over the total cost divided by, the change in total cost over the change in total output. This triangle means change, okay? The change in total cost over the change in total output, this gives us the marginal cost. The marginal cost is the extra amount it costs us to produce something of another unit. We can use this formula here. So what we're looking at is this marginal cost curve on the right. This marginal cost curve that's going down, then up like this. This is going to be one of the most commonly used curves that we're going to use. And we're always going to draw it in some of our diagrams, this marginal cost curve. And we can see where it comes from this table. It's not necessary though. You can understand it yourself. I don't really need to go through this because I doubt they'll ever ask you a question on this. You'll just if you're curious as why it looks like this, you can just read up on it. But it's basically made up of the law of diminishing returns again. Okay, so when we're increasing our labor, we're going to see that total product first increases, then decreases, as with marginal product. And we're going to also see the same thing with marginal cost. Okay, so initially decreases and then it starts to increase. Okay, so now what we want to do is put our marginal cost and our average cost together. What we saw before was the average variable cost. Okay, well, we can also have a average fixed cost curve here. And if you add these two together, you get something called the average total cost curve, which looks like the average variable cost curve anyway. So this is the start. These are basically the only two cost curves that we're gonna have to know the most. So we're gonna have the marginal cost curves that look like this. And then we're always gonna draw the average cost curve that looks like this. Okay. Kind of draw this wrong, to be honest. Okay. So notice how I put just AC and not ATC. In your diagram, you just need to put AC. When we say average cost, we're basically talking about average total cost anyway. And what we realize is that why did I draw this graph like this? Okay. The reason I draw this graph like this is because average cost mathematically has to go through the bottom point. So marginal cost has to go through the bottom point of the average cost curve, the midpoint kind of thing. Okay. Let's just say the average cost looks like a bucket. It has to be the middle of the bucket. And that's a rule. So every time you draw your cost curves, it always has to look like this or like this on the left. Okay. You don't need to know why. You just need to know that's how why is. And if you're wondering like where are these, where are these cost curves coming from? It's always coming back to these tables here. Okay. I don't think your school are gonna teach you like how to derive these or anything like that. You just have to know like the meaning of these stuff. So the meaning of marginal cost, which you just did, the meaning of average cost, which is basically the formula that we looked at. Okay, so the total cost over the amount of quantity. And you need to know how you need to know how to actually calculate them. So like, say if they give you a table like this, they're obviously going to give you the total product. They may ask you to find out the marginal product. We already know how to do that. It's just the extra amount, 49, 5, 90, 15. So it's extra 6. We know that. What about average product? So that's going to be 4 divided by 1, 9 divided by 2, 15 divided by 3. We just saw that. And what about total cost? Well, at 0 workers, our total cost is 10. Do you know why? You know why our
Because
total
of our
cost is?
fixed cost.
Yeah, because that's our fixed cost. Because we're not producing anything, doesn't matter. Our fixed cost is our fixed cost. We always have to pay it, even at 0 workers, even if the business isn't operating. That's our fixed cost. Our variable cost is 10 per worker. Okay, they say £10 per worker. So that's why at 1 worker, our total cost is 20 now, because now we have to pay the extra 10 to the first worker. At 2 workers, our total cost is 30. We have to give another 10 to the second worker, and so on. Now, marginal cost, you would think is, you would think it would just be 10, right? But remember, our marginal cost, we have to look back at the formula. It's the extra amount it costs us to produce something of another unit. And so we have to look at the change in total cost divided by the change in total output. The change in total cost from 10 to 20 is what? 10, right?
Yeah.
That's the top part of the formula. Divided by the change in total output. What's the change in total output?
0.
Change
4.
in total is 4 from 0 to 1.
Oh, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's why we do 10 over 4, which gives us 2.5. What about for the second worker? What would be our marginal cost? Well, it says here 2, but why is it 2? It's because again our change in total cost is 10. So 10 divided by the change in total output. What's the change in total output from 1 to 2?
9.
It's 5.
It's 5, right?
Yeah.
You understand that, Tahmid?
Yeah.
So again, I advise you if you don't understand it, I advise you to look back at the video. Just keep looking back at it, and you will understand. You will understand it eventually. And I didn't get this stuff the first time. You always have to look back at it, and you'll realize yourself if you're smart enough. You look at the pattern to be like, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense. This we don't need to know. Just need to know the formula. Total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost. This we do need to know. So long run costs. So what we saw so far were short run cost curves. Okay. These are all short run cost curves. Because all we're doing is just adding labor and stuff. Okay, these are variable factors. Long run cost curves, we need to, this is how it looks like. It looks like a massive bucket, like a elongated bucket. And we call it LRAC, okay, long run average cost. And what we need to do is analyze this, okay? So in the long run, if we produce more output, then our costs start to decrease. And this is something called economies of scale. So as we produce more and more, then our costs are being spread out on that output. So technically we're lowering our costs, okay? Our long run average costs. And so we keep producing more and more and more, going along this curve, going down and down, pushing down our costs. Our output is increasing. And then we start to reach a point called the MES. And this MES is called the minimum efficient scale, which tells us the minimum level of output required to fully exploit economies of scale. Whenever you hear economies of scale or increasing returns to scale, think good. Okay, this is good for a business. So a business always wants to be on kind of like this side of the long run average cost curves, because as they produce more and more, they're kind of lowering the costs. And the best point for them would be at the MES, the minimum efficient scale, because this is the lowest amount of cost that they can achieve as a business. And this is where they fully exploit the benefits of economies of scale. So again, economy of scale is literally just as you produce more, you're lowering your costs. The opposite of that is diseconomies of scale. As you produce more, you're increasing your costs. As you produce more, you're increasing your costs in diseconomies of scale. So once we reach the MES, we also have something called the constant returns to scale. So this section here between the two dotted lines, this is where we're kind of like at the MES for a period of time where it's like constant. It's like a bucket shape. So we call it the constant returns to scale, or RTS for short. So before we had increasing returns to scale, which is basically defined as the percentage change in output is bigger than the percentage change in input. And now we're at the constant returns to scale where the percentage change in output is equal to the percentage change in inputs. Okay, make sure you know these formulas if you ever need to prove if something is an increasing returns to scale or constant returns to scale or decreasing returns to scale. So now what we're seeing here is that after we finish this part, after we come to this point here, and we start to produce beyond this constant return to scale, then it's seen that we're producing way too much output now. This business has been producing so much that they've exhausted their economies of scale and their constant return to scale, and now they're experiencing decreasing return to scale, whereby it's not beneficial for you to produce anymore, because now you're just increasing your costs, where your percentage change in output is less than your percentage change in inputs. This is diseconomies of scale or decreasing returns to scale. Okay. And this is a long run cost curve. This is what can happen in the long run. So we're going to look at these economies and diseconomies of scale further and understand like what they actually mean and what are the different types of these kind of economies and diseconomies of scale. So we can break up economies of scale into two. Remember I said that economies of scale are a reduction in long run average cost as output increases. That's the definition of it. A reduction in long run average cost as output increases, and that's what we just saw here. As output is increasing, we have a reduction in long run average cost. We're going towards the MES, which is the minimum efficient scale, where we're fully exploiting economies of scale, which is very, very good for a business. That's what we want. What are some of the ways we can achieve economies of scale? There's two ways. We can have internal economies of scale, and we can have external economies of scale. Where internal economies of scale is when a firm itself benefits from economies of scale, so the individual firms. And external economies of scale is when the entire industry grows, therefore all firms benefit from economies of scale. Okay. Sometimes they also use EOS as short for economies of scale. So anytime you see EOS, that means economies of scale. But let's look at the different types of EOS. One good acronym that I used to use is really fun moms try making pies. Okay, so these are the different types where we have internal EOS. Let's look at some of them. So let's look at R. This is risk-bearing economies, or EOS. So if a firm has a diverse product range, then they're able to spread their risk as they have other products to take responsibility. Okay, which is good for a business, and this is one way they can increase their EOS. Financial EOS. So the larger the firm, due to the amount of output they produce. So in economics we say that the more output that a firm can produce, the more likely they are that to actually be quite big as a firm. So the larger they are, the more, kind of like banks can trust them to pay back their loans. And so banks are more lenient in giving these firms these loans, and they probably might give it at lower interest rates as well, because banks know that they're going to make a profit for them, like almost 100%. Yeah. And so that's good for these businesses because they're essentially lowering the cost, right? That's what EOS is. Marketing EOS, so the M part, so moms. So the bigger the firm, the more they can spread their marketing budget over a large range of output, so LRAS falls. Also, the larger the firm, the more power they have to negotiate lower prices for its marketing, for example, advertising. Technical economies. So markets where technology is a key element, buying specialist machinery to do a more efficient job and produce more in a given time period. So this is where we're basically like having more productivity through technology. So essentially where with more productivity comes a lower cost for a business because those workers, those machines are producing more in a given time period than they was before. So that's lowering costs because businesses are getting more out of their factors of production. Yeah, you don't need to know this last part. Managerial economies of scale. So if a firm can employ specialist managers, they can improve productivity of labor within those departments and run at a more efficient level. Last one, purchasing EOS. The bigger the firm, the more likely they are able to negotiate lower prices on the raw materials, such as bulk buying. Also, the reputation of the firm means suppliers will trust firms and make links with the firms, knowing that they will come back to them. And so all of this, basically, all of these factors are helping LRAS to fall. Okay, so we have internal EOS here. So what's the other way we have EOS? We looked at it's called external EOS. So when the entire industry grows, therefore all the firms in those industries are benefiting from EOS. So if you look at this, for example, it's very short. So let's say the entire industry grows in the airport industry. Okay, let's say there's a new airport and there's many, you know how many shops there are at airports and stuff. There's so many businesses that come and set up in airports, isn't it? Think of like duty free. And so they all come together. And so because there's a new airport and the entire industry just grew there, all of those firms in that part are also benefiting, isn't it? They're benefiting from EOS. Let's look at diseconomies of scale though. Okay. So this right part of the curve, why might it be that we have diseconomies of scale? Why is it that when we reach when we increase our output level at a certain point, why is it that our cost increase? And there's basically 4 reasons. We can have this CCM here, chose triple CM to help us remember it. So when the firm becomes so big, so large, and there's so much output, the firm suffers from natural problems. Natural problems such as control, coordination, communication, and motivation. So if a firm gets big, then it becomes much harder to control it, right? You're going to need so many managers and people at different levels to make sure everything is working efficiently. But that's very, very hard to do. And if it's not done right, then LRIS can increase. And you have to hire all these managers and things to actually keep it in place, and that can be costly. So LRIS is increasing with more output. It's not beneficial for this firm to become any bigger because it's so hard to control all of these people, all of these workers, the machines and everything. Coordination. So new ideas of products may be difficult to spread to people in different departments. Yeah. Let's say like we have a small firm and we have a few like smart people in this small firm. Now this small firm, they can get across their new ideas quite easily with each other, can't they? Whereas a big firm, let's say someone has a sick idea, a life-changing idea that will make the firm so much money. Well, that guy, because the firm's so big, he's like nothing to them. And so it's going to be hard for him to like get across his points, right? And so in turn, that's kind of like losing the money. There's not enough coordination. And yeah, it's costly. Communication, so similar to control, it's hard for everyone to communicate with each other, and it can be costly as well. Motivation, work where jobs are similar to many other people makes individuals demotivated, useless, so productivity may fall. If we have a business that literally producing the same quantity of output, the same product, I should say, then these workers are going to be keep on making these products, keep on making these products, and sooner or later their productivity is going to fall because of a lack of morale, lack of motivation. LRS starts to go up. Remember when we talked about the specialization, division of labor, and some drawbacks of it? This is what we can start to see here. Yeah, I really went through that. Okay. One other cost graph that you may need to know is the LRAC, which is basically what we did, but sometimes it can look like this. Okay, so the long run average cost that we just saw looks like a bucket, right? But the long run average cost here is also a bucket, but it's just showing us the left part of it. Why? Because some firms that have massive amounts of fixed costs, it will take them so long to get to their minimum efficient scale, because it will take them so long to spread out their long run average cost to the minimum point, because their fixed costs are so big that they're so unlikely to suffer from diseconomies of scale. And this happens with firms called the natural monopolies, which we will see later. But an example of this are like gas companies or water companies or like railway companies whose fixed costs are so big that even if they produce so much output, they're like to reach their minimum efficient scale, that's going to take like ages. Okay. So the main part of, so what we've done so far is diminishing returns, cost of production, economies of scale. Now we're going to look at some revenue curves, okay? So we looked at some cost curves and we understood what economies of scale is. We're going to look at some revenue curves. Then we're going to start to put them together to make up some profit curves and stuff like that. Let's take a look real quick. Okay. So do you guys know what like perfect competition is?
No.
I've
Okay.
heard of it, but yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So a lot of micro 2, the difference between micro 1, what we did last year, and micro 2, is that we're going to start to look at these different types of firms out there in more detail. Yeah. Can you hear me, Tahmid?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So we're going to look at these a lot of these firms in more detail. When I say detail, we're going to actually look at what characteristics different firms have and how do we classify them in terms of competition. So what we're going to look at is something called perfect competition. What types of firms are in perfect competition with each other? These kind of firms are firms that have homogeneous goods, which is identical goods. Homogeneous just means identical. Okay. Let's think about I don't know. Perfect competition doesn't actually exist in the real world. It's just like a fantasy kind of thing that we've come up with in economics, is that some firms can be exactly the same as each other, which can be the case, but in reality, it's not really, because there's always going to be some differences. But the closest we can get is to, like, I don't know, thinking about like a potato farmer, different kind of potato farmers, because they're all kind of producing the same product, right? They're all producing potatoes. And so they have homogeneous goods. And there's many buyers and sellers of these firms. There's many people that buys potatoes, and there's many people that sells potatoes. So this is just an example. It's just not potatoes. There's perfect information between these firms, meaning each of these farmers knows what like the going market prices of potatoes. Okay, so like let's say one farmer is charging £1 for one potato, then that other farmer who sees that, he's gonna know that. He's gonna know, or that farmer's charging £1. So what do you think the other farmer's gonna do? Do you think he's gonna charge £1 or less?
Reduce price.
He'll probably reduce the price, right? He'll probably reduce the price, but if he reduces the price to say like 90p, that first farmer that say at £1, what's he gonna do now?
Reduce
And
his.
match it or
It-
reduce it more.
Yeah, it's probably gonna reduce it more. But what's the point of that? Because technically they're both losing out, isn't it? They're both losing out on money. So now, the best thing to do, well, if that farmer sees that the going market price is £1, then every farmer is probably going to charge the same price now. Yeah, they're going to actually charge the same price, because there's no point of them trying to have like a price war with each other, because what's going to happen is that they're almost going to start selling it for free, and then they're going to go out of business. There's no point producing. And so that's what I mean by perfect information. They have the same level of information as each other. There's no barriers to entry and exit in these markets, which isn't really true. It's basically saying is that if I want to go into the perfect competition market, so let's say the potato market, then economics is telling me that, you know, I have nothing stopping me from going in there, and I have nothing stopping me from going out of there. Okay, but this is a fantasy world we're looking at right here. This is something called perfect competition, where anything is possible. We all produce the same thing. We're all the same, and we can do whatever we want. So this is like the opposite end of the spectrum to imperfect competition, which would be the opposite of all of this that we'll look at later. Yeah. So okay, so let's look at perfect competition a bit further. So what we say is that firms in perfect competition are price takers. So they have no say over the price they charge of their products. They can't raise their price as there are so much other firms in the market that consumers will go to them. And they can't lower their price as other firms would copy, so it wouldn't make sense as if they would just lower revenues selling the same amount. Yeah, so that's what we basically discussed. There's no point increasing the price because they would go out of business, no one would go to them. No point lowering their price because we already saw why. The other firms are going to copy them, they're going to lose out on revenue. Look at this graph here for a firm in perfect competition. The price is always the same. The price stays at 1 for any given level of quantity. Okay, if we produce one product, the price is still 1. If we produce 2 products, the price is still 1. Yeah. To find out the total revenue, that this is the formula. Total revenue is just how much money you make from selling your products, which is basically the price times the quantity you sell. So if you look at here, at 1 quantity, our total revenue is 1 times 1, right? At 2 quantity is 2 times 1, and so on. Okay. Our average revenue would be our total revenue over our quantity, which is also just 1. 1 divided by 1, 2 divided by 2, 3 divided by 3, and so on. Our marginal revenue, which is the extra amount of revenue that we're getting from producing 1 more unit of good, is just going up by 1 every time. Yeah, just going up by 1 every time, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. So this also stays the same. So what can we see here though? We can see that our price, our average revenue, and our marginal revenue are all the same when it comes to firms in perfect competition. Yeah. P is equal to AR is equal to MR. Okay. And so this is what we can see from this graph here. Okay. This is £1, which is, so this is the price level. Remember in micro, we have price on the y-axis and output on the x-axis, yeah? So can we all see that? That this is just a straight line, which represents a 1 figure, which is just £1, which is our price, which is also our average revenue, which is also our marginal revenue, yeah?
Yeah.
This is actually also our demand curve as well. Yeah. And so we can see that a firm in perfect competition has perfectly elastic demand, as prices cannot be increased or decreased, okay? It's a flat curve. So, yeah, perfect elastic demand. Do you all understand that, yeah? Why we have this curve that's flat? Do I need to go through anything?
No, it's fine.
Fine.
Ahmed? All right, let's just carry on. Okay, so now we have imperfect competition. So what we just looked at here was our revenue curves, basically. Okay. What we're going to see is that we're going to add this curve to this cost curve on the right. So already, these are the 2 cost curves that we need to know. Now we're going to have to add this revenue curve later, and then we get a complete diagram. But our revenue curves is different when it comes to looking at firms that are in perfect competition and firms that are in imperfect competition. So in perfect competition, the revenue curve is always flat like this. But in imperfect competition, we have different revenue curves. Okay, and we'll see that this time our average revenue and our margin revenue do not equal each other like they do in perfect competition, where firms are always firms are all the same. We're going to see that they're going to be different, and so we have to draw 2 different revenue curves that look like this. But let's first understand the opposite end of the spectrum to perfect competition, which is imperfect competition. So now goods are not the same. Now we have no homogeneous goods. Okay, firms can be innovative and produce products that cannot be copied, and now they can determine the price of it. They set their own price. There's no perfect information now. One firm does not know everything about another firm. Okay, because they keep secrets. Maybe barriers, they're most likely going to be barriers of entry and exit. Yeah, these firms, it's not easy to get into that kind of market and set up your own business, and it may not be easy to get out either because you have a lot of costs involved. There's not many sellers. There's probably a lot of buyers. Actually, there's not going to be many sellers or buyers. Okay, not as many as perfect competition. But anyway, we can draw the same kind of graph. Yeah, we can draw the same kind of graph. So here, what's the difference between this graph and what we just saw here? Now we have different price levels, isn't it? Yeah. So what we can see is the law of demand. We would expect that as the price level decreases, the quantity demanded increases, right? So when we decrease our price, we can sell more. When we increase our price, we're selling less because it's less attractive for people to buy it. And that's the nature of the law of demand. Lower price means more demand, higher price means less demand. But we can work out the total revenue, average revenue, and marginal revenue anyway. So what would the total revenue be for the first unit produced? Going to be 10. What's the average revenue of that? It's the total revenue divided by the quantity, which is 10 divided by 1. What's the marginal revenue? Well, the marginal revenue is going to be 10 as well because we went from 0 to 1 quantity and give us a total revenue of 10. And we can do the same for all of this. And we get different figures to here, this here. Okay. But one thing we should know is actually the price and the average revenue has stayed the same, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Price is equal to the average revenue, but is it equal to marginal revenue?
No.
No, marginal revenue is different. Average revenue and price are going down by 1 every time, but marginal revenue is going down by how much?
2.
2.
2. Yeah. And so that's is already explaining why these graphs look different, because average revenue is going down by 1, and so it's got like this kind of slope, which isn't as steep as the margin revenue. The margin revenue is actually twice as steep because it's going down by twice as much. All right. And marginal revenue, remember, because of the law of diminishing returns, it can also go negative. Okay. Can be a point where it starts to go negative. That's why marginal revenue can go below the x-axis, and you can draw that in economics. You can show that. They actually find it more impressive. But yeah, so what we have is that price is equal to average revenue, which is also equal to demand, which we have here. And we have the marginal revenue curve here. Okay. So what have we seen? We have seen that in imperfect competition, we have 2 revenue curves. And in perfect competition, we have just 1 revenue curve. Okay. You don't need to know this. You need to know this. Okay. Yeah. So we already know that average revenue is equal to price. This is just proving it mathematically. You don't need to know it though. Just know how the curve looks like, okay? So still looking at imperfect competition now, we know that we have 2 revenue curves. We derived them using the table. And what we want to look at is something where this point right here, okay? This point right here is actually where your marginal revenue is maximized. This is where your marginal revenue is equal to 0. Okay? Because what is marginal revenue? It's the extra amount of revenue you're getting from producing 1 more level of good, right? And so marginal revenue at this point is equal to 0, which means you can't get any more revenue from producing another level of unit. If I decide to produce more output beyond this point here, if I decide to go more toward the right, then I'm coming up on the negative part of the marginal revenue curve, aren't I? But I don't want to be here because I'm losing revenue. I want to be on just MR is equal to 0 if I want to maximize my revenue. I want to be on this dot right here. And if we look at the total revenue curve, which is this, that is the highest point. That is the highest point on the total revenue curve. This also represents where MR equals 0. So this is basically just showing the same thing. And you can see this on the diagram anyway. Okay. So which is the point where MR is equal to 0? Well, it's at the sixth output, isn't it? This is where MR equal to 0. If I decide to produce one more output at 7, then my MR starts to become negative, -2, because I go from 30 to 28. Yeah? So at this point here, my marginal revenue is equal to 0 at a quantity of 6. And at this point here, my total revenue is 30. Okay? So I can show this on this diagram here. So what did I just say? At the 6th level of output, let's say this is the 6th level output. This is where Q is equal to 6. And this point here is where my total revenue is equal to 30. And again, this is the 6th level of output. Okay. Either way, my marginal revenue is equal to 0. Okay, this is called revenue maximization. Well, I've maximized the amount of revenue I can get. It's different from profit maximization. Profit maximization is a whole different thing. Do not ever get that mixed up with revenue maximization, because profit maximization, that accounts for how much cost you're getting. Revenue maximization, we're not looking at any of the cost curves here. Revenue maximization is literally just looking at what's the maximum amount of money I can get. The maximum amount of money I can get is at 30. And that's what we saw on the table. Okay. So at 30, we can't go beyond that. We can only go lower now. You get it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So what we're gonna look at next is kind of putting these curves together. We're gonna look at the formula of profit. And yeah, so so which is good. We've done quite a lot so far, more than I expected. Done the first 4. So now we're gonna look at putting the marginal revenue curves and average revenue curves together with our average cost curves and our marginal cost curves. I'm gonna put them together, and then we're gonna derive, profit maximization. We already saw what revenue maximization is. We're going to derive profit maximization and where different firms produce. So profit maximization is different between firms in perfect competition and firms in imperfect competition. We're going to look at this all deeper, by the way. This is just very vague right now. We're going to look at this more deeper. But yeah, this is just for a basic understanding of where these curves are coming from and what like perfect competition and stuff like that is. Okay. It might seem a bit confusing now, but I'm gonna upload this video to like a YouTube playlist which you can look back on. I'm just gonna need all of your email addresses again so you can have access to it. And so I might just make it public, to be honest, because I can't be asked making it private. It's too much hassle. But yeah, how did you find it though? Are you okay? Like year 2 content is obviously a bit harder, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
way harder.
It's it's way harder. That's why I like. Obviously, I'm gonna go back over the year. I'm gonna go back over the year 1 content as well, and I'll post all of the I'll give you everything in the chat today.
Okay.
You just need to read over it. But yeah, it is difficult, the year 2 content. That's why it's very vital we get the content done with as soon as we can. I'm trying to finish micro this year, and then we can do some past papers on it. Then we have to go finish off the rest of macro, do papers on that. And pretty much that would be it. The only thing left after that would be doing paper 3s, but we don't have to go through any extra content for paper 3 because you just have to know the content for paper 2 and paper 1 and paper 2 to know paper 3, yeah. But yeah, it should be all right. You guys will be fine. Just put the work in. Is there any questions?
So the stuff we done today, is that supposed to be the beginning of year 2 content?
Yeah, this is supposed to be the beginning. I mean, different
Mm.
teachers start at different places. I always tend to start off with at the place where I feel it's kind of like in order. I'm trying to do everything in order. You might find like this checklist. If you look at this checklist here, everything teaches you from like A to Z, whereas a lot of teachers, they might just start off with like perfect competition straight away, show you all these curves, but you don't even know where like these curves are coming from. Whereas I told you where they're coming from. I showed you the tables and stuff like that. So it's less confusing.
Yeah, because like, I think I don't know about Tajwa, but I started off with number 7, objectives of firms, why they grow and diverge.
Yeah, a lot
That's
of
what we
teachers,
started as well.
yeah, a lot of teachers do that as well, but that's very, very simple. That's gonna take us like 10 minutes to do.
Yes, most of it's
Uh,
common sense.
Yeah. I have a lot like this is like everything you need to get an A star. I'm just like guiding you through it. It's very important that you just read back on it. But yeah, so like they might have started with like objectives of firms, profit max and things like that. But I don't do that straight away because I use the knowledge from previous topics to like help with the knowledge for later ones like this. Like when I talk about objective of firms, I'm going to relate it to the diagrams that you would have already known by this stage. Yeah, so can you see like like these curves aren't even like already, they're not even like alien to you because we've already seen these curves. We saw these different revenue curves that are going twice as steep and stuff. We just saw this marginal cost curve and the average cost curve going through the middle. We're just putting them all together now, and we're gonna look at this stuff anyway. So it's gonna start to make sense. So yeah. All right. Is there anything else? We'll just end it here today. We're gonna only have 1 hour sessions till we feel it's necessary to increase it. But even in 1 hour, I don't expect you guys to write anything. I just expect you guys to go over it and just memorize it and make any notes that you need to. You have the notes anyway. If I was you, I'd probably just print that out and just add anything and just understand it. Or you can just write it out yourself, even though that's a bit long. I wouldn't personally do that. If you can read my handwriting, then you can just print it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right, we'll just leave it there today, yeah?
Are you gonna upload this on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm gonna upload this on YouTube, so I've been recording this whole time. I'm gonna upload it and I'm gonna send it in the chat.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
No,
All right then. See you next week, yeah, 2 p.m.
Right.
All right, assalamu alaikum.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.